welcome to Let's Talk AppSecOps. My name is Mark Lambert, Vice President of Products here at ArmorCode. I'm joined by my good friend, Guzmán. How are we doing, Luis?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. So today, let's talk about AppSec. Let's talk about AppSecOps. Let's talk about risk and what we should be doing to quantify that and the pros and cons of quantifying risk in an organization. I know from our conversation earlier today that you literally just had a conversation with somebody about this today, right? So, how did that conversation go?
It was interesting just because they were talking about incentivizing certain parts of their information security program, having bonuses tied to this, potentially having some kind of salary increase or, along those lines associated to their risk scores. And I just said, I don't think it's a good idea, because if you're going to be utilizing a score that can arbitrarily move and not actually be watching what's been happening in the environment, for the last 6 months, but you're looking at a snapshot for the last 30 days, that could now give you the wrong incentivization, right? So now you're not going to want to report on stuff, or maybe you're not going to have that tool on so that it doesn't give you a higher risk score, right? So there's a bunch of little pitfalls that I was just like, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and actually, you got me thinking of a couple of different things here. So one of them is exactly right. It's a metric it's out of your control to a certain extent. If I'm going to track it at a particular point in time. A better thing to track would be, hey, if I'm tracking team performance, and we'll talk about that at a different time, but understanding, am I meeting my service level agreements? Am I doing the right things? Because if you incentivize somebody on risk, and one of the ways you can mitigate risk is identifying false positives, then you might find your false positive count gets a little bit high because people are going to try and steer the number down. Also, you said to me the other day, like Patch Tuesday, right? All of a sudden, a bunch of vulnerabilities appear, or let's say you update a tool and my scans are now identifying things that I couldn't find previously. Now my risk score has moved, and it doesn't really represent the work of the team, right, and how the team are working. But I say we'll talk about that one later. The other thing that I was thinking around when we were having this conversation is that often you get to the point, especially if you're adopting, security practices for the first time, we have a lot of technical debt. You have a lot of what I think of as security debt. Vulnerabilities already in the system, and your risk scores shoot to, like 10,000, right, and then they cap out, right? And I know you've got personal experience from previous lives in exactly this, right? You end up with reds across the board, and you just got no way of getting it under control because you're so far underwater.
Yep. And then the context, of the actual environment, it no longer is relevant because you're just underwater. You're like, what the heck? I just need to start hammering out as much as I can. But again, you're incentivizing the wrong behavior because you want to be able to actually see what you've been chiseling away and what you've been doing, so you have a real trend line, as opposed to incentivizing behavior that says, let me hide certain things and highlight others so that I can get paid, or I can get a bonus, or I can go to Hawaii, right? It's just, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think you have to take it back to what's the purpose of the risk score in the first place. The purpose of the risk score is to help prioritize, well, give visibility as to where my risk is and prioritize the efforts of the team. So not necessarily track the efforts of the team. And if I'm looking at my risk, another area is, am I accepting that risk, right? And that might be from a team's perspective of, hey, there's no fix available, right? I don't have a fix that I can deploy. But that risk still exists. So I'm going to have to accept it for a period of time, or accept it until that fix is available. But if I then downgrade my risk because of that acceptance, that's the wrong thing as well, because there's still risk. You need to still have that visibility.
The risk didn't go away. Yeah.
And I've had recent conversations with engineering leaders about using, tracking the risk. I'm like, what are the team doing the remediation? It's like, and you can very much de-incentivize a team very quickly when they're saying, okay, I've spent this entire sprint fixing a dozen different issues, but my risk score hasn't changed. Well, yeah, that's kind of like where you have to look at using it correctly. The other thing you said was really important as well as contextual risk, right? A vulnerability that has a base score of 9.8 that's not been exploited doesn't actually have as much risk as something that's been exploited with potentially a lower base score. And also, if it's on a back-end data sciences application, hopping back to our previous conversation, it's not as important as the front-end web app.
Yeah, exactly. And so now you've got that whole context conversation that I think we kind of touched on it a few episodes ago, but I think we should do a bigger episode just on context and where we're at with risk and how that associates to the proper behavior. Because I think it's a great topic to talk about, because I don't think we've incentivized our practitioners the right way in the past. So we'll leave that one there, pick it up later.
Yeah, and I think let's do that. Let's dig into team management in a subsequent episode, and we can talk about kind of like reducing those numbers. And as you said, I think we talked about prioritizing findings, right? Being able to look at individual findings. It's based upon the risk and the context of that risk.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's important to get the visibility, so I understand where I need to prioritize and focus efforts. But if I'm going to track a team, I need to track the team with the appropriate metric that's going to reinforce the right behavior and incentivize the team appropriately.
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks as always, Luis. Great chat. Look forward to catching up soon. Everybody else,
good.
Stay tuned for the next episode. Take care.
See ya.